everyone. This video is a book review video about a book that I have had for several years, and the title of this book is Bird, and it was written by Zetta Elliott and illustrated by Shadra Strickland. Now I don't know if it's Shadra Strickland or Shadra Strickland, so I'll just say Shadra or Miss Strickland for now. The reason that I selected this book was because recently it was National Bird Day in the earlier part of January, and I wanted to find a book that was either about birds, related to birds, or had the word bird in it multiple times. So the first book that came to my mind was this one. I honestly don't know where I got this book. I don't think I ordered it, so I may have found it in either a little free library or the thrift store. It has a library covering, and it's from Pratt City Branch Library, so I'm pretty sure it came far. Or maybe it was from New York, because I can only think of Pratt Institute. But anyway, this book is not that old. It was published in 2008, so it is a little over a decade old, give or take a couple of years. I've read it once before, but I decided to read it again just to refresh my memory. So before I get into the book, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the author and also the illustrator. So we're going to start off with the author, who is Zetta Strickland. And when I went to look up websites for both of them, they both had a website. And sometimes in the past, when I've tried to find information on an author or information on an illustrator, I couldn't find anything about them. I had to either go to their Amazon list or I had to look up other people's quotes about them. But what I liked about both of these people, the author and the illustrator, was not only did they have a website that had all of their information, they had very lengthy bios, which is helpful to get into the mind of who they are and what their passions are and what their goals are in relation to their creative endeavors. So with Zetta, she says, "I'm a Black feminist writer of poetry, plays, essays, novels, and stories for children. I was born and raised in Canada, but have lived in the U.S. for almost 30 years. I earned my PhD in American Studies from NYU in 2003. I've taught at Ohio University, Louisiana State University, Mount Holyoke College, Hunter College, Bard High School Early College, and Borough of Manhattan Community College." And she talks about where some of her poetry has been published. It's been published in Cave Canem, and she also has a novella. She has plays as well, which I thought was really interesting. Sometimes when I'm researching an author, they'll just have their books and that's it. But this lady has essays, she has plays. She is a force to be reckoned with. And her plays have been staged in New York, Cleveland, and Chicago. Her essays have appeared in the School Library Journal, Hornbook, and Publishers Weekly. Her short story, The Ghost in Her Bones, was published in the 2020 special issue of Obsidian. Now, as far as this book, this won the Honor Award in Lee and Low Books New Voices Contest and the Patterson Prize for Books for Young Readers. She is an advocate for greater diversity and equity in publishing, and she has self-published numerous illustrated books for younger readers under her own imprint, Rosetta Press. Oh, no, she got her own imprint. Okay, that is good. This is a very amazing lady. She also wrote a book called Say Her Name, a young adult poetry collection. I wonder if it's about Black femicide at all. But most of her books look like poetry. On her website, she has a link to why she writes, the interviews that she does, her books for children, teens, and adults, as well as her plays. There's also a part of it that's about Rosetta Press, where she goes into detail. Rosetta Press is committed to publishing books that reveal, explore, and foster a Black feminist vision of the world. Ooh. And its goals are to generate culturally relevant stories that center children who have been marginalized, misrepresented, and rendered invisible in children's literature, to produce affordable, high-quality books so that families, regardless of income, can build home libraries that will enhance their children's academic success. And 3, to produce a steady supply of compelling, diverse stories that will nourish the imagination and excite even reluctant readers. I like this because with this book, it was very heavy subject matter, but you wanted to keep reading to see what would happen. And she didn't make it overwhelming. She was very sensitive with the topic that she was writing about. So, yeah, very, very interesting author. Now let us go to the illustrator, who is Shadra Strickland. Shadra Miss Strickland. Shadra Strickland. She studied design, writing, and illustration at Syracuse University and later went on to complete her MFA at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. I applied for there at one point when I was in high school. She won the Ezra Jack Keats Award and the Coretta Scott King / John Steptoe Award for New Talent in 2009 for her work in her first picture book, Bird, written by Zetta Elliott. I remember John Steptoe. He's a really good illustrator. He either wrote and illustrated Mufaro's Beautiful Daughter. So it's a very high achievement for her. Let us go back to her bio. What's going on with my phone? Hold on. Okay. She co-illustrated Our Children Can Soar, winner of a 2010 NAACP Image Award. I've come across this book before, Our Children Can Soar. It's basically a bunch of illustrators and they're contributing to one book. She has published with Lee and Low Books, Simon & Schuster, Random House, Candlewick, Chronicle Books, and The Little Brown. Her books have received recognition from the American Library Association, Junior Library Guild, and other prominent literary organizations. Shadra currently teaches illustration at Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, Maryland. When I read that part, I actually had a flashback to my first year of college when I went to art school. I went to art school in Cleveland, and there were a couple of people that wanted to go to the Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore, but they called it MICA. So when I read this, I was like, MICA? I completely forgot about that. Yeah, there was one girl that was obsessed with going to MICA. She wanted to go to MICA, and that's the only place she wanted to go. And I think she actually ended up going there. She also, it seems that she does visits with children. She has events. Some of the books that she's illustrated I've come across before, like A Child's Book of Prayers and Blessings. I've come across that one. Whitewater, A Place Where Hurricanes Happen, Never Caught, The Story of Ona Judge, Ghost Boys. A lot of the books that I have come across or skimmed through were illustrated by her. So she's a very popular illustrator. Now, as far as this book, if you are a parent or a teacher and you want to talk to your children or a young person about sensitive matters in the form of poetry, I think this is an excellent book for that. In this book, we are discussing the sensitive topic of substance abuse, possibly gang violence, but it's really not the main center of the story. It's mostly what happens when a loved one is dealing with substance abuse or suffering from addiction of some sort. And it's told from the perspective of a little boy who is a visual artist in the form of a poem. So we're going to start. This book has illustrations front and back. It's very beautiful. You open the flap and it's birds. It's him drawing, and we see this hat. That hat plays a part in the story too. Today I saw a bird outside my window. It was perched on the rusty rail of the fire escape, shivering in the winter wind. I wanted to open my window and bring the bird inside, where it was warm, but a sudden gust of wind blew the bird away. I drew a picture so I wouldn't forget. Now the color scheme in this book stays pretty much the same. It's very pale colors, not much sun, blues, greens, reds. No, not reds. Blues, greens, pale colors, like the cold. And you can see his drawings on the wall. Mama and Papa named me Makai, but Granddad calls me Bird. That's what he used to call me anyway. Granddad passed about a year ago. Now that he's gone, his best friend Sonny looks out for me. I call him Uncle Son. He comes by once a week and takes me to the park. Mostly Uncle Son and I just sit on our usual bench, tossing stale bread to the pigeons. Uncle Son says he likes talking to me because I keep him on his toes. I like this part of the story because sometimes when one mentor dies or passes away and you're a young child, that's a vulnerable time where you could get a mentor who isn't good for you. So I like that one elder guided him and then another elder came in his place just to keep him on a straight and narrow path. And this is just coming from working with children. All of the years I worked with children, they're so easily influenced, and if they get with the wrong person who might come up and say, oh, I'm smarter than you because I'm older, it could lead them down a very slippery slope. So I like that Uncle Son is taking his time out just to impart wisdom on the boy and preserve his innocence. I like talking to Uncle Son because he treats me like I'm grown, not like I'm some little kid who can't understand anything. Uncle Son tells me stories about Granddad and all the daring missions they went on during the war. Granddad and Uncle Son were pilots. They used to fly even higher than the birds. Uncle Son says flying a plane is the best feeling on Earth, except you're not on Earth really. You're a part of the sky. You see all this? I wonder which war. In Korean, Vietnam. And he just spends more time with Uncle Son. Once I told Uncle Son I wish I could play the saxophone like Charlie Parker. Uncle Son just shrugged. That other bird, he's all right, but don't you waste your time trying to be like him. You just remember, everybody got their something, and that includes you. I'm glad that he said that because some people will go through their lives trying to emulate somebody else instead of being their own unique person. I know I had come across a couple of months ago this interview with Jackie Chan, and he was talking about when he first came out. he was trying to be like Bruce Lee. But there is only one Bruce Lee, and you are Jackie Chan. Before Jackie Chan became his own thing, he was trying to get towards this archetype, and it just didn't work because that's not who he was supposed to be. Some people are doctors when they really should be ballerinas. Some people are educators when they really should be a carpenter or something. They're in the wrong thing because they're either pressured into what they're supposed to be instead of what their heart is saying, or they don't have access to get to those things. Like they may not have a studio in their town or somebody to teach them carpentry, but ultimately the soul is going to find a way to, I guess, act out its purpose in this lifetime if it can. I like to draw. I'm not real good at it yet, but I try to practice every day. Uncle Sun says that's how you get good at a thing. Do it over and over until you practically do it with your eyes closed. For now, I keep my eyes open because I'm still learning how to get it right. It's kind of hard. There he is practicing his drawing, and there's more birds. I like it because that's how I practiced drawing when I was a child. Except I would try to copy family photographs and try to make it look as real as possible. So that's how I practiced human faces. But other times I would be in art class and we would be outside, draw what you see. Some people, they're afraid to make a mistake if they're practicing a thing. But how you learn is by making mistakes. Once you make that mistake several times, you will not repeat that mistake again. Because now you've discovered a pattern in whatever habit or hobby or pastime you're trying to learn. So here comes the green hat again. Right here. That green hat from earlier belongs to his brother. I draw the things I see in my neighborhood, buses and trees and buildings and people, but mostly I like to draw birds. That's not why they call me Bird, though. Granddad gave me that name after I was born. He said I used to lay in my crib with my mouth wide open. I'd cheep just like a baby bird in its nest waiting to be fed. When I was little, I needed someone to look out for me. My big brother Marcus used to do that, but he can't anymore. Now, that was a deep line because it basically segues into what is to come. Nice foreshadowing. So him and Marcus are in color, and then as you can see, hats. Just hats. I think that's Marcus's hat. It looks like it. Let's see. Marcus used to go up on the roof, but not to watch the birds. His face would be all tight and angry when he left. But when he came back downstairs, Marcus would be chill. He never let me go up on the roof with him, but sometimes afterward, he'd take me to the store and buy a big bag of chips and 2 bottles of soda. Then we'd go to the park and hang out. I never asked him why his eyes were so red. I just listened to my big brother talk about the sky. Marcus told me there was a place high above the clouds where everything was calm and still. Sure can't find no peace in the street, Marcus would say. I guess that's why he went up on the roof. I really like how the author says a lot without not saying a lot. And even the part about the red eyes, that could mean 2 different things. It could either mean he was like doing something, or it could mean he was crying. I don't know. But I guess that's up to interpretation. I also like how the birds, there's just the silhouettes of them. It's almost like an omen. But we don't know why he was mad. We don't understand why he was mad. I don't know if it was because he was growing in teenage angst, because I honestly don't know how old Marcus is. I don't know if he's a teenager or if he's in his early 20s. I don't know. But he's young enough to live with his parents, so I'm assuming he's a teenager. And also how they view their living situation. Maybe Makai was content because everything was taken care of. But Marcus, after Granddad died, did Marcus have a mentor? Would Uncle Son be a mentor to him? Or did he feel all alone? I don't know. Or no, Granddad was still alive. Okay, never mind. Or maybe he felt his folks couldn't understand and he wanted more out of life. That's how some people get messed up. They want more out of life and they want it now and they want it fast. And they will do anything in order to get it. But sometimes anything is the wrong thing. Marcus was real good at art. He was the one who taught me how to draw. He'd make fancy words with all kinds of colors and swirls. Marcus would show me the picture when it was done. A few days later, I'd see it up on a wall near my school. Granddad called it garbage graffiti, but Marcus called it art. Granddad said real art belonged in a museum. Marcus said our hood was his museum. He said the street was where he belonged. What does this say? Bronx? I don't know what this says. I don't know if it's the Bronx or I see an X. There's Marcus doing graffiti. That's really an interesting, also another conversation. How you view places. How you view art. Granddad, when he saw the graffiti, to him, it probably represented the devolvement of a community. It represented a domino effect and detracted from the beauty of where they were living. That it meant no good, that there was a stigma over graffiti. Whereas Marcus, he just saw it as a form of expression because his world was somewhat colorless. Because even here, like, this is one of the more brighter colors in the book. And it looks like it's shaped almost like a heart. It's coming from his heart. I was talking to one of my friends a day or two ago, mostly about people, let's say, in the music industry, and how they wouldn't leave where they came from behind them. And I'm not talking about forgetting about the people that helped you get to where you were, but essentially certain type of behaviors that could put your life at risk. They would hold on to them instead of transforming into a more mature person with a newer identity. Whenever you hold on to anger or whenever you're satisfied with things that are deteriorating before you, you're going to end up in a cycle that's going to be hard to get out of. Sometimes we become comfortable with what we are in because we either are too afraid to change, or we're too comfortable to change, or we don't know how to change. We don't know who to ask. Marcus stopped drawing a few years ago. That was around the time he stopped going to school, and that made our folks real upset. Sometimes Marcus would walk me to school, then he'd go hang out in the park. I'd ask if I could hang with him and his friends, but Marcus said no. It's not too late for you, Marcus would tell me. Stay in school and make Mama proud. If I complained or talked back, Marcus would get tough with me. Do what I say and not what I do, he would snarl like a fierce pit bull. Marcus could be scary sometimes, but then he'd smile a little, so I'd know we were cool. I'd go to school and Marcus would leave. One thing I do like about Marcus is that Even though he's struggling, he doesn't want his brother to go down the path that he's going down. Even though he's suffering with addictions or whatever he's suffering with, he wants to still protect his brother and not expose him to that world. And that's one of the gifts that Marcus leaves for his little brother, honestly, in the book. And also, a profound line to me is, it's not too late for you. Stay in school and make mama proud. Some people, when they go down that path and they're deep in whatever they're in, it might just be a lifestyle that is bringing harm to them and their family. They think that they can't escape. They think it is too late for them and they can't go back, that there's no redemption for them, so they might as well go to the other side. It's self-destruction. That's why some people will be like, why can't they stop? Why didn't they stop for their children? Why didn't they stop for their spouse? Because in their mind, they're already gone. And there has to be something greater to stop them, to stop that. Either they wake up when they hit rock bottom. A lot of people will turn to a religion. They'll choose a belief system, and that's the one thing that saves them. That's why I really don't have a problem with some religions, because that's usually the only thing that could save that person. That's why I don't mind if a person is super religious, because they need some type of doctrine to keep them on a straight and narrow path. Some people can do without, and they can be spiritual, or they might not have any type of spirituality, but they have discipline over their life, and that is what works for them. But some people need more, or else they will be hopeless. When you reach a state of hopelessness, you can reach a state of helplessness, and your life spirals out of control. It's very sad to watch, and it's very taxing on the people that love this person. It also becomes the person's identity, and they feel that they can't escape it. One person in history that I like to bring up a lot is Malcolm X. Everybody remembers him as Malcolm X, but people forget that he was in the streets too. He was in jail. He was stealing. He was doing all these things with substances. He was doing all sorts of stuff. But we forget, because he redeemed himself through his work, through his belief system. He redeemed himself. I also think that's why a lot of people go towards religions like Christianity or so, because who wouldn't want to be forgiven of their sins? Who wouldn't want all of the things they have done to be erased and forgotten? It takes the burden off of them so that they can evolve. We as humans sometimes like to punish other people for the rest of their lives. They'll do something when they're 20 and we're still punishing them until they're 80 years old. And it's over. They're not the same person. But we still continue to punish them. And that's just very sad. It's very sad. And I'm talking about like every average day people. I mean, there's some that are in prison and stuff, but I'm talking about every average everyday people. They'll be like, I remember in college, they did this and that. And well, that was when they were 20. Now they're 58. Are they the same person? So what happened over the course of 30 years or more? Honestly. Whenever I finished one of my drawings, I'd show it to Marcus. He would tell me whether I was getting better or not, and he'd show me ways to fix my mistakes. One time I knocked on his bedroom door, but Marcus didn't say, "Come in." The door was a little bit open, so I pushed it, just enough to let my head inside. Marcus was curled up on his bed, shaking and sweating. I asked him what was wrong. Marcus mumbled something about needing a fix. "Don't tell Mama," he whispered. Now I'm trying to figure out what it was. I don't know what Marcus is on. The only clue is this looks like a spray can. So I don't know if it's huffing or something else. But it's really, really sad. It's just getting darker and darker and darker. I didn't know how to fix Marcus, so I left my drawing on the floor and went back to my room. The only people I ever saw shaking and sweating like that were the crazy people in the park. Mama called them addicts. Granddad called them junkies. Papa said to stay away from them, 'cause people like that would do just about anything to get more drugs. I stared at the eraser on the end of my pencil. Then I drew a picture of me and Marcus on the roof. Marcus was better the next day, but after that night, he started to come home less and less. Now this one, I think this one is a sign that this is a drug house, but I'm not sure. But this is a really sad picture. And this is really the part of the book that gets real when it's talking about drugs. Like they even mention drugs in there, which a lot of children's books don't mention that often. They'll speak in code, but they won't get to the nitty gritty, the symptoms or anything. Like this is probably one of the realest children's books I've read, even though it is a poem. And some people are afraid to share these types of books with children, but this is just reality. There are children actually living in this situation, and maybe they want to see themselves somebody that's going through that, what they are going through, because they're either hiding it because they're afraid or they're ashamed, and every book that they're reading is some princess book or, oh, I'm a train, I'm going down the hill, and not their reality. And they feel all alone. So that's why I like this book, because for some children, this is their reality. They have a Marcus too, and they are Makai. Or they are Marcus, and they have a Makai. It's just how life is. It also shows how addicts are treated. They're never somebody's brother or somebody's mom or sister or cousin or grandma or friend. They're addicts. They're junkies. They're crazy. Stay away from them. How did this person get to that point? I know some people in my neighborhood, I'm like, okay, that person's on that. That person's on that. They'll be screaming where I'm at. I had a man, I smiled at him 2 days ago. He screamed. He was an addict too. He screamed, I'm going to throw you in the snow. Get away from me. Get away from me. What happened to that man? I wasn't even mad at him. I'm just like, what happened? It could be like this. They could be trying to forget something. They could have had an illness that wasn't treated. They could have been in a toxic relationship. We don't know what happened. And we plaster a label onto them and dehumanize them. We turn our eye because either we don't want to see it, or it's actually dangerous to help them because sometimes they'll be violent, or we just don't want to see. We don't know how, because they'll be right out there. It's a cycle. One Sunday, when we got home from church, all our stuff was gone. Our TV, our stereo, the microwave, my video games, and all of Mama's jewelry. I thought we'd been robbed, but Papa didn't call the police. Mama sat down at the kitchen table and put her hand over her face. Granddad called a locksmith. Later that night, Papa told me that if Marcus came by, I wasn't allowed to let him in. That didn't make any sense to me, 'cause Marcus is family and he lives here too. But Papa said Marcus was sick, and until he got better, Marcus couldn't come around anymore. I asked Papa I asked Papa if what Marcus had was catching. Papa looked at me for a moment. Then he shook his head and held me long and tight. See, this is the other side of addiction that some people don't see. The people that are caught up in the web. It's destroyed the brokenness of the family. Even though this is a piggy bank, I could almost see it shaped like a heart. Their heart is broken. The mom can't believe it, and grandpa, he's seen this before, so he's really the one making the phone call. But the two parents, they're just devastated. They're probably thinking, where did I go wrong? What did I do? And holding their last son tight. Now, this kind of reminds me of when I was a child. When my dad was alive, he had addictions too. Now, at the end of his life, I don't think he was addicted to anything. I think he got off of it, but I don't know how long he was off of it. If it was like 20 years or as he got older, he just stopped. But when he was younger, like in his 30s, in his 40s, he still suffered with addiction. And at one point, he did steal from us. He stole our VCR, which had my Sesame Street tape in there. And I don't know what else he stole, but I specifically remember my mom's like, he stole my baby. It's not funny, but like, sometimes my mom, when she talks about it, she's like, and then I told him, don't take my baby's 7. So like, even though I'm 35 and I'm still the baby. So sometimes she's like, and he took my baby's VCR with her Sesame Street tape in it. But that's what he did. Does that make him a bad person? Does that sound like I'm just speaking ill will against him? I'm not speaking ill will against him. That's just how it was. That is what he did. He was suffering. He was suffering from addictions. And he went out there in the street. Now, the one thing he did that helped was he didn't bring it to our home. He didn't come towards me and bring all of that towards the family. He just stayed out there, and he just avoided me for years. Even on the street, he would see me. He would like pretend like he didn't see me. We would avoid each other for years and years. And sometimes I was like, is he even alive? Or is he dead? At one point, I thought he was dead, and he wasn't dead yet. But I hadn't seen him in like 5-6 years. I didn't know where he was. And the last year I saw him alive, that was the most I had ever practically seen him in my life. And by that time, he had gone off of that. He had gotten out of that lifestyle because he was in his 60s, and he just didn't have time for all of that. He had health issues and stuff. I'm surprised he even lived as long as he did. That's why some people will stay away from that. Some people that are addicts will be like, my family abandoned me. Well, they probably were scared. They didn't know who you knew. They didn't know who you were, what you were involved with. One of my friends had a boyfriend who was an addict, and he stole her car and used it for activities. And I didn't want to ride in that car. Nothing against her. I was just afraid, what if he did a deal gone wrong and they knew which car he was in? You have to think about these things. So some people will leave. They'll get away. They don't want to get caught up. And it's just really sad. It's a cycle of fear. It's a cycle of pain. And seeing your loved one turn into somebody else, into a person that you don't recognize at all. I try really hard to obey my parents, but sometimes I break the rules. A few weeks ago, or after we changed the locks, I heard a knock at the door. Mama and Papa were still at work, and Granddad was listening to his radio. I didn't take the chain off, but I opened the door and peeked outside. Marcus was standing there in the hallway. He didn't look so good. I figured he was still sick, but Marcus said he was feeling a lot better. He told me that he'd be coming home soon. I wanted to take the chain off the door and let my brother inside, but Marcus said he couldn't stay. He just came by to give me something. He pulled a bag out of his jacket and handed it to me. Inside was a book about birds. I asked Marcus to wait for a minute. Then I ran to my room and took my best drawing off the wall. I raced back to the door and slipped it to Marcus. "This is the best one yet," he said with a smile. Marcus carefully folded my drawing and put it inside his jacket. Then he went away. I asked Granddad what it would take to fix Marcus. Granddad pressed his lips together and thought for a long time. Then he put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Some things can't be fixed, Bird." Later I went to my room and drew a picture of Marcus the way he used to be before he got sick. Back when he was my big brother and not some junkie we had to lock out of our home. I pinned my drawing to the wall and stared at it until my eyes filled up with hot, angry tears. Marcus's face became a blur. I threw my pencil at the wall and it snapped in half. The next day I taped my pencil back together, but Marcus never got better. This looks like a car. And then it doesn't go into the details about exactly what happened to Marcus, but it just segues into, it gives you a clue with the first line on the next page, which is after the funeral. We don't know how he passed. It really doesn't matter how he passed because it was almost inevitable. He was on that winding path. It's very sad. But it's very still sensitive, which I like. It's not overwhelming, but it says enough in this book. After the funeral, Granddad went to bed and stayed there for a really long time. Mama said his heart was troubling him, but Granddad said his bones were just tired. That was about the time Uncle's son started to look out for me. Now we go to the park together every week. Thanks to the book Marcus gave me, I can name pretty much any bird I see. Uncle's son likes the mallard duck best because it's so shiny, because it's got a shiny green head with a soldier wearing a helmet. I like the cardinal because it's bright red with a pointy crest. When it flies, the cardinal looks like a fiery spark blowing through the trees. A little mallard duck. I like mallard ducks too. And ironically, the cardinals, that's our baseball bird in St. Louis. I like seeing them, especially if it's up against the snow, then they look even brighter. Or in the autumn. I don't know if I've ever seen one in the autumn, but they're just a beautiful bird. In the wintertime, it's easy to see the blue jays playing tag in the branches. Uncle's son knows a lot about flying. He told me that birds aren't light because of their feathers, but because they have hollow bones. Uncle's son said, things that live in the sky are fragile. We only think that they're strong. I wish I could have fixed Marcus, I told Uncle's son. He just turned his lips upside down and slowly shook his head. You can fix a broken wing with a splint, and a bird can fly again, he said. But you can't fix a broken soul. Very sad. Then Uncle's son told me a story his Nana told him. And this is the part of the book where you actually kind of see, you get more color. I don't know if you can see it, sorry. Look, it's starting to be warmer colors. It's not so dark and gray. When he was just a boy, there was a time, he said, when our people could fly. Back then, when there were still whips and chains, folks held on just as long as they could, but when the body broke, the spirit went free and carried the poor soul home to Africa. Is Marcus in heaven or in Africa? I asked. Uncle's son said Marcus was at peace. I think this was probably one of my favorite pages in the book. That last line. It's like, is he in heaven? Or that's such a child question. It's just, I don't know. I just love this page. Is Marcus in heaven or in Africa? I asked. Marcus was at peace. Granddad passed 2 months after Marcus. Uncle's son said he thought Granddad went to heaven to keep his eye on Marcus. That made sense to me. The next time Uncle's son and I went to the park, I looked up at the sky instead of the trees. The sun was going down. It looked like a pink and silver blanket was about to cover the whole world. Heaven's that space high above the clouds where everything is calm and still, right? I asked. Uncle's son nodded and smiled at me. When I got home, I drew a picture so I wouldn't forget. Aww. And there's Marcus and Granddad. But yeah, I really liked this book. It was a very powerful book, condensed into a poem. It's one of those books that would be wonderful to start a discussion or to talk with the youth about sensitive things that they might be exposed to when they're older, or how to have an understanding of someone that's going through that, or if one of their friends has someone going through that too. But I would give this book 5 fudge buckets. Mostly because the writing was great, the illustrations were great. I liked the concept behind the whole thing. There was a lot of work that was put into this. None of the words in there was wasted, if that makes any sense. Everything in this book said what it needed to say in the length that it needed to be said. So yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this book. I'll be back next week with another book review. Have a wonderful night, everyone, and happy reading to all of you. Bye-bye.